watching the sun gently slide into the water's embrace, or fireworks dancing on the canvas of the night sky. Even if tomorrow were better, it wouldn't be worse, I thought. When you're reading this letter, I imagine much has changed. Whether it's yourself or the world.
See here. Hey Kaudin, long time no see. Just to check, just doing a sound check to see if everything's working. Let's see. Is my audio good? Is it too loud or soft? Are you looking at it from one ear? To make sure everything's set up before announcing it. Is it too soft? See. I think you guys can hear me. This needs to be on top. Penny and Ruby. There we go. Alright, hi everyone. Everyone started to come in. Doing a quick sound check to make sure all the volumes are correct before I really dive into it. So first I have to check whether my volume is loud enough. Could make it louder then. I reduced the decibel gain, but now I'm put it back to max. How about now? Alright. Is there too much background noise? Nothing like that?
Starry night. Starry night. The loving mother.
Okay.
Look up. Cherish both her luminous love and caring, his wrath and cruelty. Yet the Father, devouring all flame and glare,
Alright.
never graced the sky.
This is about as loud as I can get. So then it'll just be a matter if the in-game sound is too loud. you guys can definitely hear some sort of background noise. I think that's kind of unavoidable. I've already turned off my fan, so if there's any other sound in the background, it kind of has to be dealt with that way. Alright, in that case, I think we can begin. So, let's see. Let me just make sure everything is in order before I proceed. Alright. Let me turn on the stream on my phone. Alright, welcome back everyone. Haven't streamed in a long time, but on a whim I decided to get back into it, if only to talk about the ZZC RWBY connection.
Can I have a latte, please? Extra sugar.
So the reception to my latest video was kind of better than I expected, and it seemed that there are at least a non-insignificant number of people who are at least curious about Zenless Zone Zero, the game, and how it might connect to RWBY. And of course, not everyone can or may want to install the game itself. So, in order to sort of spread my propaganda, why not actually stream the game itself and show people who may not want to play it. So, let me just mute this for now. This one has to be muted. Okay, let's see. Where's the sound setting for this? Where is... Okay, I've it on my phone. The stream on my phone. I need to cut the volume for that. I'll do it manually. Alright, that should do it. So we're gonna go in game, and I will start. I'm not sure where to start exactly, but I think we'll just jump into probably the character simulator and see where we can go from there. The gacha Brainrot is real, Echo, but actually it all starts with RWBY Brainrot, which you can argue is even worse. So everything seems to be working fine. So this is the main city, New Eridu, and I did talk about it in the video, but I'll just sort of do a once-over for those who didn't watch it. This is basically like the veil of the setting. It's like the main hub city, and it's sort of where you do everything. It's sort of your home, your actual job, because there's like a protagonist in this game. The protagonist of this game is Belle or Wise. You can choose the gender of your main character, but you basically run a video store in the city, and so basically you are kind of already an adult character who's working and running a video store, but on the side you are also kind of moonlighting as a proxy. So what a proxy is something like a hacker or like a mission control, because in this world there are these zones called hollows, and hollows are basically like these giant apocalypse areas. They're like these giant these giant bubbles that corrupt everything inside, and they've been spreading since the last few decades, I would assume. And it's basically what causes the apocalypse in this setting. So so there needs to be certain types of people who have an ether aptitude is what they're called, but basically anyone who's strong enough is able to enter these hollow areas and explore it. And so there are many reasons one may want to enter a hollow, some to salvage materials or to get certain items within, but for most cases you may want to enter a hollow is to slay ethereals. So I can just enter one right now actually and show you what one would look like. So let me do a combat one. So we do like a fairly low-key combat. This seems alright. No, I'll do a slightly easier one just so I can talk while playing it. Yeah, this one I like an open air one. This is commission details. Slightly challenging. This is Hollow Raiders. We want to have one, find one that has ethereals in it. Let's go to chapter 2. Looter, superior firepower. I think this one should work. Alright, so obviously we pick our main team. This one has teams of 3 instead of 4, unless you count like the Bang Bull, which is like kind of like a mascot character in this game, but they basically help out and kind of automatically attack enemies, so they're kind of like a 4th member. But I'm gonna go in game just to show you like what the inside of a hollow looks like. And of course this game has so much style to it, obviously the character intro, animations. Okay, so here we are inside of a hollow. So basically a hollow is like I mentioned, a giant zone that consumes everything inside. And you can see in the distance, if you can see clearly, there's like this prismatic effect on the sky. That's kind of the border of the hollow. And while inside, you can see these giant crystals sticking out of the ground. That's basically like I forgot what you would call it here, but it's basically like ether crystals. And these ether crystals, I believe, are what people harvest for energy. That's also kind of a reason why you will go into a hollow, is to harvest ether crystals. And obviously we talk about RWBY here, so obviously you can kind of say that that is like the dust parallel in this world, that you have to go into these hostile environments filled with monsters and kind of go get these crystals that help power your city. So I'm going to get one of the bonuses here. So our characters here that we're using now is Miyabi. So Miyabi is kind of the, obviously it's the katana user. I mentioned her in the video, but she's kind of like the Adam Blake adjacent character. Although there is another Blake adjacent character, which I'll get into in more detail. Another character is Yanagi, and Yanagi is an office lady warrior character, which we don't really have something like that in RWBY. There's Sokaku. Sokaku is another character who doesn't really have a RWBY parallel, but she has a big... She's probably one of my favorite character designs in Zenless Zone Zero. She's an Oni girl, and obviously there's no Onis in RWBY. But I love her weapon. It's a big, like, axe thing, but it also opens up into like a banner, and you can use it to like buff certain characters. And it's just like such a RWBY idea. You get what I mean? It's like, instead of like a flag or banner, a regular ass flag or banner that buffs people or using magic, it's just like a giant axe that folds out into a banner that buffs people. And that's that kind of willingness to just have an idea like that and go with it is kind of what makes me miss so much of like RWBY, early RWBY, when playing this. So these guys, they're not ethereal. These are hollow raiders. So they're like other guys who would go into the hollows and try to like plunder it. And they're basically like bandits in this world. So we are gonna fight them. Now see, there's a lot of different movesets in ZZZ. Obviously there's like the perfect dodge. And then when there's a yellow flash, that means you can parry it. So I'm gonna wait to see if you can parry.
I'm here.
Weakling. Good work, Chief.
There's a lot, thank you there.
Secure the perimeter. My blade is already.
But yeah, you can really get a sense of the combat going on.
Wait for time.
Unfortunately, I cut. Oh yeah.
Now,
And he
wait.
refed the chain attack. But can't concentrate too much on talking while doing the combat. So I'll try to conclude it while just having you guys get a sense of how flashy the combat here is. Oh god, not this guy. No. I wanted an easy level.
Surrender.
Yeah, fight. Not the casual showcase that I wanted to do.
I swear on my blade. Mind and body.
There's still hollow raiders, so we have not encountered ethereal in this game yet. But ethereals are basically like the grim of this game, so I would like to show them within this game when possible. But these are just like bandits. I was hoping to face ethereals, but we just treat this as a combat showcase.
Sweat the decisive.
Right.
My blade is already. Enemies suspecting sick
Right.
shall pay.
Try to finish this. Ow. Not going well, guys. Not going well at all.
Victory, the only option.
Ah yes, and the wipeout screens. So yeah, basically, throughout this game, what I really love about it is just the sense of style and aesthetic that basically permeates every aspect of it. From the UI, of course, but from you saw the character intros where they walked in, the actual fight animations, but you know, the wipeout screens are another. It's just everything in this game is just designed to look as cool as possible, and that is a goal that I cannot fault them for. It's something that is definitely something that I believe was lost in translation in RWBY over time. And we've got a message. We got a message from Soldier 11. This is one of the characters. I'll go through each one actually. But yeah, you can also talk to characters on your phone and socialize with them. That's all part of the gameplay thing. We won't go into all that here though. But it does, you know, help a lot with immersing yourself into the world and connecting with the different characters in it. And what we want to go here is the VR device. So the VR device, we can just go to free training and we can look at all the different characters, and I can talk about them at a more decent pace. Let's see. Alright, let me just check the chat. I might want to lower the in-game volume a little. Yeah, during the combat, that may be the case. Let me do that right now. Oh, I did not actually find it, but sure, why don't you come and get it? Couple of days, sure thing. What I want to check is these settings. I'll put about 4. Let's put it 4 maybe. Alright, so let's enter free training. We can go in with 3 characters at a time, I think, so we'll pick a few to start with. Let's see. Why am I struggling the easy level? Because I'm talking at the same time. I swear I'm not as bad as this. We can start with, well, we already saw Miyabi and Zuyuan. I think I'll talk about maybe the characters that I don't have, since
This is the path I follow.
we'll talk about the characters I don't have, since we can go from there. So let's see. Well, first of all, I think we'll go character by character. So let's start with Team RWBY, right? So Team RWBY, we'll start with RWBY. So Belle, the main character, the protagonist, is what I've been calling her, and well, some of other people that I talked to who also shared the Brainrot. She's basically like a blue RWBY, so like a blue bee. Why I say that is because if you know, you watch the cutscenes and all that, she has a very RWBY-esque personality. She's very like bubbly and excitable, kind of has that ADHD brain going on, and she's also, obviously she's the protagonist, but I would say that RWBY actually gets split into 2 characters.
Eradicate all
So
evil.
in contrast to other like Hoyoverse games, the main character is not actually like playable. They don't actually fight. They're just more like of a mission control type character. So while all the other characters fight, the proxy, which is what your profession is, will be like sitting at their computer and sort of directing them through the hollows, because the hollow is like an entire, like a labyrinth, and it's constantly shifting inside. It's basically like a chaotic zone within. So what the proxy needs to do is to sort of help guide them through and help them get in and out safely. So it's a lot less of a active fighting role, which works for the game. Definitely, I find that games that the previous Hoyoverse games that kind of have the protagonist be a playable character have a problem that you end up kind of shafting them usually, even if they are pretty good, because you know obviously you get them by default, and you kind of want to use all the new characters that you want to use even more. So you end up kind of having to shaft the main character, which is definitely a case in like Genshin Impact or whatever. So having the protagonist be someone who is a more passive role, but who is always involved in every mission because they're always kind of, you know, directing the mission in general, I think was a very smart decision from the ZCC developers. But yeah, so
This is the path I follow.
so for RWBY, so we're gonna get into full conspiracy mode here, right? So I speculate. Now, first we gotta have some disclaimers, right? So I don't think every aspect or character in ZCC was influenced by RWBY, but I do think there was at least some kind of influence going on, a hidden agenda, if you will, because well, first of all, you can look at the Team RWBY cabinet that we have here, right above, right under the VR device. That may be a coincidence, but I'll leave that up to your discretion. But I was talking about in my ZCC RWBY video about how at the time that RWBY came out during 2012, that it would have been, and it was something that I think a lot of people watch, especially aspiring animators and artists would have, I believe, you know, like me, would have been very much into the Red trailer and RWBY, even if they didn't stick around for like the show itself. I think just the example of the Red trailer itself, RWBY's fighting style, the fact that it showcased how a 3D anime could look like, I think that had at least some sort of ripple effect onto maybe not the entire anime industry. That's, you know, that's glazing will be a bit too much, right? You gotta have some realistic expectations here. But I think it did at least influence enough key people who would later, you know, 10 years later, grow up to become industry professionals, you know, animators. Obviously, Dylan Studio is the more obvious one because he actually worked on RWBY. But I think other animes too, across, you know, different parts of the world. And I don't doubt that there would be a number of them who would have liked RWBY, right? I mean, I had a whole spiel last time about how Arknights, another game, would have also been influenced by RWBY, but that's a different form of Brainrot. But yeah, so that disclaimer is that, you know, I believe some parts may be influenced by RWBY. What I'm gonna explain about all the different characters, they're not, I wouldn't say they're directly based on RWBY characters. They probably just follow like certain archetypes. But for the benefit of the resident RWBY fan, which is me and whoever of you watching, we can have some of the copium and delude ourselves into thinking that, yeah, they were definitely based on this character, right? Just to sort of humor ourselves, you know. Please don't actually like believe this, but I think it's just fun to kind of speculate and kind of enjoy the game based on our enjoyment of RWBY, right? So let's see.
This is the path I
So
follow.
first, we want to talk about RWBY, right? And RWBY, my speculation is that RWBY got split into two characters, right? So, because, you know, if you don't want to port the entire character one-to-one, you want to like take elements of them from here, elements of them from there, and like split them to different characters. You take like RWBY's personality and main character status and you put it on Belle, and then everything else you put on
Touch my
Ellen.
tail, and now.
So Ellen is like this maid shark girl, and I speculate that they cut RWBY in half, they took an axe, they split RWBY in two, and they gave her color scheme and her combat style to Ellen. So Ellen's like the shark maid. She works for Victoria Housekeeping Company, one of the manufacturers in the game. But she has that kind of gothic dress to her. She has the red and black hair, and she has like a giant, not scythe, but she has like a giant pair of scissors, I would say, or they're like gardening shears, because like all of the Victoria housekeeping characters have like a kind of made aesthetic to them, which includes their weapons, which are kind of like oversized gardening tools, which means that for Ellen, she has the big scissors. So I would like to go in game and show her off.
Touch my tail.
We'll go each character one by one, but we'll pick 3 characters for the VR simulation. So I'll go to like Weiss. So Weiss, there is no ice character
This is the path I follow.
that matches Weiss per se, but personality wise, I think
To what do I owe the
the
pleasure?
clear culprit is Lucy. So Lucy is, if you know her backstory, Lucy, she is basically like a tsundere Ojo-sama noble girl, right? So personality wise, she's like the Weiss counterpart, simply because she's like the only character who is like very clearly that kind of tsundere noble woman type. But it's also in terms of backstory, because she is part of a faction called the Sons of Caledon, and the Sons of Caledon are basically like a biker gang operating on the outskirts of New Eridu. So you can imagine, you know, if you have Vale, then you have like these gangs outside of Vale who are trying to like survive outside of, you know, the walls of the kingdom. And Lucy's backstory is that she was some sort of noble, right? She was a rich girl of some sort, and then she joined the biker gang, the Sons of Caledon, in order to escape her noble life. And that and that already starts sounding familiar to you, right? Someone who gives up their life of comfort and privilege in order to go live basically as like a warrior and like a wanderer, right? And another thing is, this is part of like the story, so I can't exactly show it here, but if you like play the story and all that, one of the other characters, the leader of the Sons of Caledon faction, is Caesar.
Only the brave will win.
And Caesar,
That's me.
we're gonna talk about Caesar soon, but Caesar is the leader of the faction, and Lucy
To what do I
Lucy
owe
has
the
a
pleasure?
beef with Caesar because she thinks that she Lucy thinks that she should be the leader of the gang, and she's like constantly butting heads with Caesar over it. And I'm like, you I mean, yeah, you know, it I think, you know, the similarities here are very clear. She's like a very like a foil, like a lancer, you know, like a very second in command type who says that, you know, they should be leader and all that, but actually they're, you know, still a very supportive ally, because she does in the story she does beef with Caesar over like the leadership of the gang, but she is very clearly like a very loyal and supportive ally, and who does believe in Caesar's leadership deep down, but you won't ever get her to like actually admit it. So that's like the Weiss, but she's like fire, because she's just fire to fight, and she doesn't have a rapier, but you know, the vibe
To what do I owe the pleasure?
of Weiss is there, right? In terms of like the character backstory, her dynamics with other characters. So obviously you can see that it's not a one-to-one, because obviously you can't you gotta have some benefit of the doubt, right? You can't we're putting on our tinfoil hats here, that if they knew, you know, they were basing it kinda on RWBY and all that, obviously they don't want to copy RWBY one-to-one, because, you know, well, let's not even talk about copyright. It's just about, you know, you have your own ideas, right? You want to make your own OCs, but if you like RWBY, you know, let's entertain the delusion. You like Ruby, but you want to like kind of like mix and match some elements. You wanna don't make it seem too obvious, so we'll make Wise a fire character instead of an ice character. So you know, that's the kind of headspace we're in, right? So then next is Blake. So Blake, like I said, we have Miyabi,
Eradicate all evil.
and Miyabi is kind of like the, I mean, there's the obvious traits, right? Like the animal ears, the long hair, and the kind of Japanese aesthetic with the katana fighting style. That's kind of where the similarities between Miyabi and Blake end. Obviously, if you've seen fan art, Hiro, a RWBY fan artist, draws a lot of ZZZ RWBY fan art, because I would like to take credit for helping infect them with the Brainrot as well. But basically, they drew a lot of fan art involving like Blake as Miyabi, with like, because Miyabi, it's not here. You won't see it here, but she has like this ghost character that follows her around, and in that drawing, she like Hiro drew like the ghost as Adam. It's like a joke, but it's that's like one thing. But that's kind of where the similarities between Miyabi and Blake end. So
This is the path I follow.
if we want to speculate that, you know, they take these characters and like split them into two, then they split Blake into Miyabi and into Nekomata.
I'll help you win. The lunch is on you.
So Nekomata, I don't have her, so we kind of have to play her in the simulation by herself. But Nekomata, she is obviously like a cat girl, so that's kind of the obvious similarity there. But in her character story, Nekomata is basically, and she dual wields. That's kind of a superficial similarity, but you know, we take what we can, right? We take what we can. So Nekomata, her backstory, which is quite early in the game, so you'll encounter it quite early. She used to belong to a gang, right? A criminal gang, alright? A criminal gang called the Red Fang, okay? And she was part of the Red Fang, but the Red Fang got corrupted, right? They started hurting the innocent. They got too blinded by their love for profits, because you know, it's not a, we can't make it too obvious. We gotta have like, it can't be a revolution group or freedom fighter group. No, it's just a regular criminal gang, because you know, maybe someone saw that how much of a shitstorm you have when you try to like write a racism plot into your story, and how, you know, how easy that is to mess up. So instead of making a freedom fighter group fighting for race equality, you know, fantasy race equality, you just make it a typical criminal gang, so you don't have to struggle with all of that. And then you call it the Red Fang, and then you have this cat girl who belongs in that gang, who sees that the gang is becoming corrupted and straying from its goals, and she leaves it and joins the protagonist. I am not kidding. You play her story, that is her legit backstory. But personality wise, she's not like Blake at all. She's more of, you know, like the typical playful energetic cat girl, right? So she's not
I'll help you win.
they took-
The lunch is on you.
they took, quote unquote, Blake's backstory and gave it to Nekomata, and they took Blake's general
This is the path I follow.
personality and combat, I guess, into Miyabi. Although there's not really a Blake type of character combat wise, because Blake's combat is so unique. But you know, the general katana sword type gameplay, right? Those is kind of evenly split between them. So that's Blake. Let's see. So then, yeah, reading the chat. exactly, Hero. You get it right. So yeah, and I forgot to mention as well. Thanks for pointing it out. That Lucy also has the side
To what do I
ponytail,
owe the pleasure?
right? She has a side ponytail. They're really making it hard for me not to draw similarities. Like you can say I've the brain rot all you want, but they're really making it hard to not
Good day.
draw similarities. But yeah, so next is Yang, right? So Yang is my speculation that Yang got split into two characters as well. Two characters that I don't have, so we have to showcase them individually later. And that is Caesar,
We fighting? Take me.
and who you see in the thumbnail actually for this, Caesar and Lighter.
Want to see the red scarf?
So Caesar
Only
and
the
Lighter
brave
are
will
both part of the
That's me.
Sons of Caledon, the biker gang. So you can say like that Wise and Yang, the Wise and Yang adjacent characters are in the same faction, which is honestly kind of base. That means they might have been feasible shippers. But that's stretching it too far. But Yang, Caesar is the Yang in terms of personality, mainly just that, because other aspects that Volume 1 Yang clearly has that we all know. Two very big aspects, but Caesar is the kind of big sister, has a very big sister type personality. She's very like tomboyish. She's very easygoing. She's very much like Volume 1 Yang in that she's very easygoing. She's very protective of those she considers family. If you even like watch her, so even if you like don't play the game, you can still like watch the character demos or like the character trailers, which are on the official Zenless Zone Zero site, and you can get a sense for the characters. And also here she has like a sword and a shield. But again, like the creativity involved with like the weapons, it's not just a sword and shield. It's the fact that it's like a tire, and the tire spins when she uses it. So which I'll show in the combat later. But personality-wise, she has like the vibe of Volume 1 Yang. Lighter has the combat of Yang, right? So nothing else besides that, but he has Yang's combat. He's a fire user and he punches things. Basically that's Yang. And we'll see his gameplay as well. So
I'm here, so we're good.
next I wanna touch on Seth real quick, because I think we'll jump into the VR and look at their actual gameplay. But Seth,
call me anytime.
I'm not gonna mince words. Seth is Jaune in terms of not fully, like not 100%, but he's essentially like the Jaune of Zenless Zone Zero, because he has a shield. I mean, he has a swan shield. It's a baton and shield, but same thing. And he's kind of like the straight edge nice guy of the cast. Like if you encounter him in game, he's very like upright, very driven to justice. He has a very like strong sense of justice and drive. He's very determined. He's like a very shonen protagonist type guy, which is not entirely. I mean, Jaune has different elements to him. He has elements of that. He's not as goofy as Jaune, obviously, but he just has that general Boy Scout vibe that I think fits Jaune more than any other character. And the fact that, and you can say, Boy Scout characters, morally just, it makes sense to give him like a sword and shield, because that's kind of like what knights use. But we all low-key know what they're trying to do, right? So I'll show his combat in game, because
Need help? Call me anytime.
what makes it even more like Jaune-ish is that his sword and shield is essentially like a charge blade from Monster Hunter. He kind of sort of like combine the baton and the shield together to make like a giant sword, which is basically like what we saw in Volume 4, right? Where Jaune, he sheaths his sword into the shield, and the shield turns into a bigger sword. And I know Monster Hunter did it first, but I'll just go into the VR, and you'll know what I'm talking about. So we have Ellen.
This is the path. I've touched my tail.
We'll have Lucy.
Good day,
So
proxy.
we have RWBY, Wise, and we have Jaune.
A
Alright.
mission. Take me along.
No, we got them in the order here first.
Good
There's a
day,
certain
proxy.
order to do this. This him,
you need help,
him.
Touch me.
Right.
To what do I owe the pleasure?
Alright. So ZZ is also very nice because it has like a training mode. Quite a comprehensive training mode compared to like, especially for like a gacha game, where you can actually like put down the settings like how you want the characters. Do you want like the enemy to move? We don't want the enemy to move. We want the enemy to be invulnerable. We'll enable that. Stunnable, yes. Enemy level, we'll put it up to 40. Unlimited energy. No. Yes, we'll enable this. And then we'll enable the decibels. Alright. Okay, so we'll start with Ellen. Let me just check the chat before we proceed. Yeah, Caesar. Wait, hang on. So, yeah, so Nekomata has a Blake's background and Miyabi has a personality, but Adam's combat
I'm
style.
not very patient.
Essentially, yes.
That's probably obvious.
Essentially, yes. Gold VA. Caesar even has a robot hand. Yes! I neglected to mention that, but Caesar also has a prosthetic arm. Okay, we'll go there later. So, Lighter is a Kamen Rider reference. Yes, I think with the scarf and all that flows around him, I think he also is a Kamen Rider reference. Because, I will inform you right now, it's best that
they're not moving,
when making your own thing that you aren't just informed by RWBY. Please do not only use RWBY as your reference. Please watch other things and be inspired by different things. You do not want to be only associated with RWBY if you want to make something actually quality, right? But yeah. Yeah, Jaune is pretty much Seth. There's no mincing words there. That and, just when I get straight into it. Paternal Rex. What animals would have the best or worst time of their life? Living Remnant. I wouldn't know. There aren't many animals in Remnant to begin with. Like, you really know that dogs and horses exist. So, that's that. Alright, so let's go into it. So, we can see with Ellen, we have the general RWBY vibe, gothic, Lolita-ish aesthetic with the big ass weapon, and she is very much has a combat style based on speed. So, there's no semblances in this game per se, but obviously all the characters are superhuman. They have like these gigantic bombastic fighting styles, but Ellen, she has like this special sprint. So most characters just have a dodge or like a normal sprint, but Ellen has a special sprint that lets her run faster, so like this. And when she's sprinting like this, she has like additional buffs and attacks that she can use. So yeah, a black and red character with a giant gardening tool that has speed as their main like combat style. Okay, I see you, but and then her attacks are also very, I wouldn't say RWBY-esque. I mean like Ruby Rose-esque, but it's definitely very RWBY style, right? Because you're not gonna see combat style in like volume 7 or 8 or 9 where a character just like kicks their weapon as part of their combo, right? In early RWBY you would have seen it, but you won't see that in like later RWBY where a character just straight up just kicks their weapon, it spins and then comes back to them. Because, you know, we have to be logical and realistic in later RWBY, right? There's a serious story now. We have like save the world. We can't have awesome shit that happens for just because it's cool. But you know, that's that. And she has like so each character has like a basic attacks, and they also have like a skill. So she uses a tail to attack, and it's also obviously very cool to look at. But we gotta get enough energy first. Oh, didn't mean to switch back. We'll get to you later, Jaune. So let's get enough energy for Ellen first. So you get energy from attacking and all that. We want to get it so that we can see like all her different abilities.
Hurry up.
And of course, she has a more like a goth type personality, which we don't really have in RWBY. Blake is kind of the closest, but I wouldn't exactly describe her as like a goth type personality, which is, you know, another thing that RWBY could definitely do with more goth girls in RWBY. That's another thing, a great loss to society. But she has like an EX skill, which is basically like an empowered skill.
Hey.
That is basically like a more powerful version of your skill when you have enough energy. And of course, she has the ultimate.
Thank you for your patience.
Which is like a giant ice storm. And I really just appreciate
How annoying.
how they
Get flushed.
animate the different movements in like the game. How
Shark
you
nani.
can see her like kind of swimming through like the air like a shark when she attacks. Just like this attention to detail and how like the characters move, that is very cool, because you know we know that RWBY has like fauners. So if there was like a shark faunus in RWBY,
Hey.
I would definitely see them moving around like this, you know, like in her EX skill, you can see her like kind of swimming as like she goes around and slices everything. So that's so-called RWBY, which is Ellen. Next is Wise. So combat wise, she's not that much like Wise, but because she fights with bat instead of a rapier. But what she does, just kind of like one of the most fun just like fighting styles in the game, is that she summons like these little pigs, and these pigs fight for her. So I already know what you're thinking, because I'm thinking it too, or maybe you're not thinking it and I'm the only one who is crazy here. So we have a tsundere girl who was a former noble who ran away to become a warrior with a side ponytail, and she fights by summoning other creatures to fight for her. We have an entire ass checklist for Lucy, okay? But yeah, basically she fights with the bat, and she summons the pigs to fight. So when they get close to the enemy, they kind of like attack for her. It's like a very fun playstyle. It's very it's just very like fun to look at. But
A beautiful shooting star.
but that's kind of the extent of the similarities to Wise, because the combat style is not super similar. So, and we already talked about how Lucy is similar to Wise in terms of character. So we'll go to Seth next. So we're gonna talk about how Seth is basically like, it's like kind of like what they wanted to do with Jaune if they knew what they were doing, right? Essentially. Okay, let me check the chat first. A weapon morphs into a size shape when she ults. You mean Ellen? I mean, she opens it up.
Get flushed.
I mean, she definitely opens it up, right? Because it's scissors. It does kind of look like a size shape, but you know, maybe that's a bit stretching it. I don't know. But let's see. yeah, but back to Jaune here. So I would speculate that, you know, if we're entertaining our delusions here, Seth is kind of like Jaune. Like what they wanted to do with Jaune in Volume 4, but they didn't have like the budget or the resources, or they just weren't, you know, they couldn't be asked to do it. But he has like regular sword attacks. It's a baton, but let's just call it sword. But he also fights with the shield alongside it, and the shield is also like a part of his combat. Like Seth has some of my favorite like attack animations. He's like kind of a lower rarity character, but he has like some very exceptional attack animations. They're very nice to look at. And it just has like his shield also has like a core thing inside that kind of like emits electricity, which, you know, can easily be like flavored as like a dust core inside of the shield, right? Because we all know in Volume 7 they started adding like more tech stuff to Jaune. Like they gave him, I believe they gave him like a gravity dust thing in his shield, and they gave him like some dust bombs as well. But I mean, an actual thing in the shield itself that emits dust, it's not too far-fetched, right? And then one of his other attacks, I believe he like charges the shield up. Ah, this is the one. See? That's his shield sword thing, which is, you know, it's a charge blade, but it's basically like the sword in Volume 4, right? That you can sort of see what they were trying to do with that. And then he has a charge attack as well that also involves the sword. Because it's even more apparent in his ultimate.
Prepare to face judgment. Which one?
That's really cool. And I mean, you can definitely see like the fact that the shield transforms into the sword in such an elaborate way that it feels like more RWBY, you know what I mean? Because in Volume 4 it just like kind of like you put the sword in the shield and it kind of like, it does a little bit of transforming. Okay, we'll give them points for trying. But this one
won't be forgiven.
It changes its entire shape, it shifts, it has like, it actually like looks cool, it looks like a great sword. It looks like an actual like Monster Hunter sized great sword and not just like a really weirdly wide looking normal sword. It has the sauce, you know, it has the sauce, is what I'm saying. And yeah, I'll showcase a little bit more of his animations, because this is a lot to enjoy about Seth's animations, and you can just sort of picture Jaune while looking at him. He has some of my favorite animations in the game, mostly because of how sauceless Jaune's normal combat style is, that looking at Seth's combat is like such a huge contrast by comparison. Like at least the other characters in RWBY, they have like some things going on with like the early volumes or like other aspects of them that make them interesting to watch combat wise. But Jaune has always been kind of like the vanilla sword and shield guy. But Seth's combat is like a really like shows like how much further they could have gone with Jaune. You know, without making him too crazy. Like if you want to make him like still the sword and shield guy, you can still have like, you know, some combining stuff. You don't have to like be too shy about it, you know.
Prepare.
It is RWBY. You gotta have to be RWBY with it, and this is definitely how you should be doing it. Is what my sentiment is. There goes the chain attack, of course.
Your crime won't be forgiven.
Yeah, and that's basically tag team attacks baked into the game itself, right? The chain attacks. So when you stun an enemy, you fully stun them,
Accept your punishment.
and you can activate like a chain attack which is essentially like a tag team attack. So again, it's just a very RWBY style combat system in general. Like, not really do you have like the very flashy animations, the very flashy attack animations, but you also have like the tag team attack, which they're not attacking at the exact same time necessarily, but they're like kind of, you know, they're linking off each other. They're like kind of they're working as a team. They're working off each other. They're kind of like switching one after the other. The combat style is very, not just RWBY-esque in terms of how it looks, but RWBY-esque in how it should feel like in essence, right? Because RWBY is all about teamwork. RWBY is all about kind of like working together and kind of like synergizing off your teammates. And this is another thing that Zenless Zone Zero captures very, very well. And why I say it's such like a RWBY-esque game is because, you know, not only because of these superficial elements, but because it has like, it just captures a RWBY essence in how the game works, how the game wants you to play, how the game, you know, just generally feels. So let's exit this for now and we can try the other characters. Let's see, let's read the chat. As I said before, they should embrace Monty's ability to infuse the cool factor of bombastic animation to ladder RWBY. Animating this hard is hard, especially for constant new hires. Well, yeah, that was a thing I touched on in the video, but in my previous video. But the fact that all the animators in RWBY are like contract work, right? So they work on like maybe 2 years is what around 2 years, and then their contract ends, and you know, they get let go, right? So even if they're not laid off explicitly, their contract still ends, and then they move on to whatever project. Which obviously, like, I think why fan animations get like the RWBY feel correctly isn't necessarily because, you know, fan animators are better than professional animators, right? Let's not, I mean, as much as I love fan animations, let's not gas things up too much, and like, let's be realistic here, right? Professional animators are professional animators for a reason. And you know, obviously there will be fan animators who animate at a professional level. They just make things because they want to. But it's because fan animators, they have all like the time in the world to study, the time and the freedom to study RWBY's style, Monty's style, and to capture it as much as possible. But when you're in like RWBY's production, and your job is not to replicate Monty's style, your job is not to make good fights. I mean, yes, you make good fights, but only as much as it needs to keep viewers watching, right? You can tell that fights were not a priority in later RWBY. They were cool, yeah. Some of them were still quite creative, especially like, you know, like the Watts versus Ironwood fight. That was still quite creative. But you can tell that it was no longer like the focus, right? Because the focus became the plot. The focus became like all the relic shit going on, the Maiden stuff, all the plot twists, all the... I compared it to like Game of Thrones in my video because it has this kind of obsession with trying to tell like this grand story that it really didn't need to tell, right? It could have just been about these teenagers kicking ass and killing monsters in a school, and we all would have been happier for it. In hindsight, I think we all would have been happier for it, looking at the state of the show, right? Because it was so like concerned with like, oh, we had to have like this twist here, we gotta have this character come back. A lot of the really most infuriating things in RWBY are plot based, right? It's like a story decision of some kind, or like how they decided to portray a character. It's, I mean, sure, you know, if the fights were less exciting, That's one thing. But if you don't even like compensate for it with like a story that feels like true to the characters or feels like well earned, then what even is there left, right? Because RWBY, early RWBY, may not have much of, it's not gonna win a Pulitzer, guys. It's not award-winning storytelling at all. But it had the fights, and as long as you had the fights, you can argue, it's like jingling keys in front of a toddler. Oh, look at the big flashy animations, even though the story is kind of whack, not that great. But it's the core identity of the series, right? It's about the weapons, it's about like fighting, it's about, and just because it has fighting doesn't mean it can't be a good story. And even if it isn't like a great story, it doesn't have to be anything other than that, right? I mean like you read like let's say, I don't read Catcher in the Rye or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't read like literary fiction for fights, and I'm not watching an action show, I'm not watching an action show for award-winning writing. I'm watching it to watch cool fights. And there is this kind of concern that later RWBY had with trying to appear as legitimate fiction, right? To appear as like a legitimate, well-written, high-budget production, that it sacrificed everything else to get there. It sacrificed good sense in terms of, because they had to have twists, right? Because Game of Thrones has twists. Game of Thrones has like Red Wedding, big ass things that happen that change the status quo, right? Everyone starts dying, people start betraying each other. You have to have the twist. You have to have characters turning against each other. You have to have all this. And what did we get for it? We got a lot of discourse. We got a lot of controversy. That's what we got. We got a lot of unhappy people who had their favorite characters utterly, well, you can say butchered. I think a lot of, if you're watching my channel, you'll be of that inclination to believe that. And if you ask me, in hindsight, it was not worth it at all, right? It was not worth it. You did all that. You wanted to make some Game of Thrones style thing because you wanted to have twists. You wanted to have a dark, serious story. Because, your little idea of making a high school monster hunting academy was too, it just wasn't legitimate enough. And what did you get for it? You got a lot of unhappy fans, right? You got a fandom that split down the middle. You got hours and hours and hours of video critiques tearing apart your writing, telling you how bad it is and how unqualified you are to write this sort of story. And I have some sympathy for that, because I've been ambitious with my projects before. I've wanted to explore entire worlds within my story, but it is what it is, and it is something that they had something unique, right? If RWBY was kind of more generic, if RWBY didn't have like a giant size, he just fought like with like a sword, it's like if it was more generic, then sure. But RWBY was very unique in certain ways, right? Sure, it was a mix of different things from different things, right? It had fairy tales, it had like the Shonen Battle Academy. It is very derivative in many ways, but why we keep talking about RWBY is because it was unique in a way that maybe at the time people couldn't define, right? It had the weapons, it had a unique combination of traits that made it unique, right? Maybe by itself, its premise, its story, its characters, they were not unique. Why is this a tsundere? RWBY is like a happy-go-lucky protagonist, but it's the combination of these many elements that made RWBY what it is, made RWBY RWBY. And to give up on all of that, to change all of that in pursuit, I would say misguided. It was a misguided pursuit of something that it really did not have to be. Was kind of the crux of most of its problems, right? That's my sentiment, at least. But yeah, I was talking about the animators, and the fact that they keep switching out the animators all the time means that they did not view animation as the core part of RWBY, because had they view it as such, you know, because Monty was an animator, so you know, when you're the creative lead of the project is an animator, he's going to prioritize animation. He's going to prioritize the fights. He's going to prioritize all this, and that showed in early RWBY, right? It showed in how the weapons are animated. It showed in the amount of detail and care put into the fighting styles, because you know, fighting in RWBY, or rather good fighting in fiction, should not just be fighting. It should communicate stuff about the character. A great example is like the Pyrrha and Mercury fight in Volume 2. They weren't just fighting. There was like at least some plot going on, right? Mercury was trying to figure out what Pyrrha was, right? What made the invincible girl invincible, and he figured it out by figuring out her semblance, by forcing her to use her semblance on him so that he could determine what it was. And you know, that's storytelling through fighting. So you can't tell me that you cannot tell a legitimate story through fighting. If anything, it felt like smoother storytelling, right? Because instead of sitting in a house, instead of... I'm getting a bunch of notifications. Let's let that play out. But yeah, instead of talking to a magic genie to tell you the backstory of the world, instead of sitting in a house waiting for Osprey to tell you what is the plot, you just fight and have the plot come out from the fighting. It's that simple, folks. It's like these characters are trying to figure each other out. They're trying to like, and you see their personalities through the fighting. Like you can see how measured Pyrrha is, like trying to fight Mercury, how defensive she is. You can tell how inexperienced Jaune is from how he fights. You can tell how RWBY speed-based combat style is like communicates how she like rushes headlong into danger. How Weiss is more of a supportive role. All of this is really good characterization through the fighting, through the weapons, through how the characters fight. It's very suitable for, guess what, an action-based series. You know, it's not rocket science. It's, you know, you have an action series, and RWBY was really good at communicating its characters through the action, through the weapons, through how they fight, and that's how they should have gone it. And okay, I'm ranting, so I'm just gonna go to Nekomata. Can I like change? No, I cannot change them. All right. Whew, okay, so Nekomata is... Yeah, I already know all this, but so no, we don't want you moving, but okay, fine. So Nekomata is interesting because, I mean, she has a very nice animation. Like you can see, like all the animations in Zenless Zone Zero are so unique. Like when she stops, it's like this very like cartoonish skid. But yeah, so her fighting style is based on like these dual blades, and I really appreciate that it's not just dual blades, it's dual blades that she sheaths within her boots, right? Like you look at her... No, stop interrupting me. Like, you look at her boots and you see these handles sticking out of them. That's like where she keeps her knives. So like when I need to get far away from you. When she whips out her swords. Oh my god. Yes, I get it. When she sheaths them back into her boots. Like, can you see that? Like, I really... this is like kind of that RWBY thing I was talking about, where it goes extra. It is extra as fuck. Because there is the sense that these guys... Oh, they actually like... they they legit made the cactus stop walking because I was not hitting it. But yeah, it's the willingness to go extra because you would not, because you know, cactus in latter half of RWBY was so concerned with, you know, trying to appear legitimate, trying to be realistic. I get it, game. I get it. I'm trying to make a point here that they're trying to like appear all realistic and all that. They're not willing to engage with this sort of crazy stuff, right? You can't have an idea, and you know, I wouldn't say that it's an actively malicious thing, right? Let's be fair to Rooster Teeth here and to RWBY. It was not malicious. It's because Miles and Carrie, they're just not in tune to this kind of thing, right? They are Western gamer bros. I mean, that's just an observation. That's exactly what they are. They're gamer bros. They were like a frat house kind of group. That's what Rooster Teeth was, and they did not know anime at all. They had no idea what anime really was until Monty showed them, made them watch Cowboy Bebop, Soul Eater, all this sort of stuff. Yeah, you know what? Just stay on the screen while I talk about it. They were not otaku, right? I was talking about how Monty was an otaku. Miles and Carrie were not otaku. You know, it's not their fault, right? You know, Monty still came to them to help him with RWBY. It's, you know, they had a duty to do, so I'm not gonna blame them for, you know, still doing RWBY and all that. But what RWBY was, the kind of tropes, the kind of intention, right, that RWBY was made with is a complete mismatch with the types of creators that Miles and Carrie were. They were like Western focused creators that, and I'm not making it like an East versus West debate. This isn't like thing but Japan comparison that East is automatically better than West. It's just that, you know, RWBY was made very clearly as a love letter to Eastern media, to martial arts movies, to anime, to all this sort of stuff. And it's very clear that later RWBY was made with a very Western lens, right? It's made with this kind of Game of Thrones style plots. It had a very Tolkien-esque big fantasy world. It wanted to be like Avatar. It wanted to have these large plots because, you know, Western media emphasizes more on plots and world building because that's kind of the groundwork laid by Tolkien, laid by Western fantasy in general. It emphasizes these sort of things. So by its very nature, by the very mindsets that Miles and Carrie approached RWBY, it became something different, you know? It may not, let's argue that if it wasn't bad, it would still be different, right? Even if it was good, it would still be different. It would still not be the RWBY that we started with. I think that is something, you know, that's not a wild assumption to make. It's just the facts, right? It's just looking at the facts. They had very different mindsets because of just, you know, the kind of climate they were raised in and just how they view media. This is just speaking facts. And because of that, RWBY was always going to change if Monty wasn't there, and, you know, Miles and Carrie continue leading it. And which is why for Viz, I really hope that Viz understands this and hopefully goes back to RWBY's more anime roots, right? Goes back to being extra and being like visually driven, right? Because latter RWBY was very writing driven, right? Because, you know, Miles and Carrie, they were writers, they were not artists, they were not animators, they were not, you know, visually driven creators. So everything was based on writing, it was based on the plot twist, it was based on which character should go where. It was all about, you know, things that should happen on screen. It was not about the visuals or the animation or the fights at all, which very clearly was what RWBY's emphasis was early on. And yeah, so let me read the chat. So yeah, so in a normal story, you made the character sheath the weapons based on where it would make sense. But if you're making a RWBY story, you'd let them keep it anyway. Exactly. It's about the willingness to think about the coolest way you can do something, right? That's kind of the root of the matter. What is the coolest way to do something? And that is kind of what RWBY was built on. RWBY was built on, I mean, what is the one phrase that, you know, the casual RWBY fan loves to say? It's also a gun, right? It's also a gun kind of summarizes what RWBY is about, in the sense that everything in the story is a weapon, and every weapon in the story is also a gun. Which means it can transform. It can, you can use it in melee and from range. It means it's about combat. That phrase, it's a phrase that people love to use because it summarizes a lot about RWBY very well, because it's the willingness to just engage with combat as an integral part of the story, right? You know, a story is not lesser or greater because it's only about fighting. That's most shonen anime, right? Shonen, you know, one of the biggest genres of fiction in existence right now, especially the biggest for anime, is entirely focused on combat, is entirely focused on characters fighting and characterization being shown through fighting, right? And characters fighting over their ideologies. You know, they're not, yeah, sure, they're talking it out, sure, they're like debating it, but in the end, it's about fighting. And you know, fighting is not just fighting. Fighting is like it's like a metaphor, right? It's like a visual metaphor for what's going on. And this is fiction. Fiction is meant to be larger than life, you know. Well, you know, the kind of fiction that RWBY tries to be, at least. You know, you can have, you know, realistic storytelling like in RWBY, like latter seasons of RWBY, or you can have it like in a shonen anime, where fighting is meant to be like an expression of the character's will, an expression of the character's personality, an expression of the character's ideology, because you have these larger than life characters who are meant to be more than normal people. They can fight monsters, they can wield these gigantic weapons. They are not regular people, they are more than human. And how do you show that they're more than human? You can show that you're fighting, but also the way they fight conveys their personality. If a character is more defensive, if a character is more of an attacker, or more of a defender, or more of a supporter, and what they believe in as well, like, or their general vibe, like, you know, a sneaky character would go around with daggers, a more of a tank character, or more of, you know, like a knightly character with a sword and a shield. These are all things that RWBY kind of had, that kind of, you know, the building blocks that make RWBY. And back to Nekomata, this willingness to, you know, just the simple fact that she has these metal boots, and these metal boots are where she stores her knives, is RWBY energy. I mean, it's very RWBY energy. I don't know what else to tell you, because it's that kind of, if you guys know that if she was a volume 7 character, if she was a volume 8 character, she would have her swords like on her side or on her back, you know, somewhere typical, somewhere normal, you know. She would not have them on like her freaking greaves, where she can like pull them out and then like slap them back into her knees, because, you know, a regular realistic pilled rider is gonna be like, no, she's gonna like slice the legs open, right? She's gonna like accidentally stab herself. Oh, look at me, I have no fun in life whatsoever. I'm a miserable person who doesn't know how to engage with fiction, how it's meant to be engaged with. She's gonna cut her legs open. Or you can say, you know, she's a trained combatant. She works with her blades for so long that she knows exactly how to sheath them without hurting herself. She's a trained professional. And if I want her to put the damn knives into her damn metal legs, why shouldn't I? And that's precisely the kind of mindset that you need to have when making something RWBY-esque. Yes, I get it, I get it. And she has a very cat style way of fighting as well, as you can see. Like, she's like clawing them, and it's just, you know, very satisfying. But yeah, that's my rant about how that goes for like RWBY characters and designs, and how ZZZ gets it right. Because, and look at it, you know, the backflip, just like the extraness of it all, right? Because she could just do like a normal dodge like this, but she does like a backflip, right? Because she's a cat and she flips. It's just that, you know, it's very cohesive, right? It knows, it has confidence in what it wants to be. It wants to be extra. It wants to be as, you know, as cool as possible. And you know, the cat girl fights like a cat. And maybe sometimes, you know, sometimes you don't need a racism plot. Sometimes it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Sometimes the cat girl should just be a cat girl, and maybe the world would be better for it, you know? Maybe in hindsight, the world would have been better for it if the cat girl was just a cat girl. I'm just saying. Maybe the world would have been better for it. And I think ZZZ understood it because, you know, they don't have the racism plotline. They just have the cat girl be a cat girl who exists in the world, and that's fine. But yeah, let's take out this real quick so we can move on to the next character.
Wanna try my massage? Preparing takedown.
It's been a long time. Right. Oh my god, there's still more. Alright. Alright. I would like to switch. So, yeah, so Lettuce says Halo is a much more grounded, realistic series than many anime. True, but even Halo... But come on, even Halo has like crazy shit happening, right? Like I don't really play the Halo games, but I know at least that, you know, Master Chief, he can punch a freaking tank, you know, he can flip things, he can flip like a tank over because he has super strength. The Needler gun is not a realistic gun at all. It's like an alien ass gun that shoots needles and makes them explode. Even Halo has like cool shit that happens because it's cool, not because it's realistic. And RWBY, you know, RWBY was too concerned with being realistic that it was like unwilling. It was maybe even afraid of engaging with those things. Maybe they were afraid of not being taken seriously. I don't know what. I mean, I can kind of get it because I have been in that mindset before. That kind of like, I want to make like something like a great fictional work, but you gotta treat what you're making, like you gotta treat what you're making on its own terms and what it can be, not what like the standards of fiction would be, even though there are really no standards for fiction per se, but you know what it specifically wants to be. And that has to do with identity, because RWBY may not have been like perfectly planned, right? It may not, you know, because obviously we all know that Monty himself didn't really plan it so far. You know all know about like the Maidens, how Neo was like a random character that he made up on the spot. We know how like Summer's grave was not even decided until like it was actually put into the red trailer. We know that. So it's not like RWBY knew what it was, right? It's not like RWBY figured out everything about itself, but RWBY knew what it wanted to be, right? It had like a goal in mind, or a goal in its gut that it wanted to be, and at least while Monty was working on it, because obviously he's the creator, he would know what he kind of had in mind for it, that he made it have that energy towards what he wanted to make. And I'm not saying that Monty had the perfect vision either. I think he, like anyone else, would probably also get carried away by the world building bug, because I believe the maidens were his idea, and the entire Fall of Beacon world expanding plot, I'm pretty sure it was Monty's idea, right? The general big strokes of RWBY. So it's not like Monty was immune to that either. I think he too kind of wanted to tell like an expansive world, and probably got carried away by that as well, because in hindsight, he probably just wanted to make like his own cool world, right? I mean, I can respect that desire, I can relate to it, but it's only through hindsight that we understood that RWBY would have benefited from being such a much smaller story. So let's see. So let me just look at the chats. Yeah. Who was next? So yeah, next I think we're looking at Caesar, and I'll probably try Lycon later, but Lycon is like, he's like Faunus Mercury. We'll talk about him later. But let's look quickly at we'll look at Lighter, because Caesar is just like Yang personality wise, but Lighter is Yang combat wise, so that's what we're gonna look at. Let me take a quick water break. So okay, let's set our expectations correctly here. Let's set our expectations correctly here. A character who punches with fire is not a unique idea. All right, it's like if anything, he's more like a Street Fighter character, right? He has a Shoryuken. He has like the JoJo punch thing. He's a lot of things that are not Yang, more than Yang itself. But since we're talking about RWBY, Lighter is the Yang character in terms of combat. So he's the punchy character, and I just want you to picture Yang while watching it. And if anything, Yang kinda has more going on, because Yang can actually like shoot bullets, so Yang has like ranged attacks and all that. So by that respect, Lighter is a lot more straightforward. But it's just that it's just cool, It's just cool, and cool is a very valuable resource in today's economy, is what I would say. In light of RWBY's hiatus, I think people just need to let shit be cool again. You know what I mean? People need to just be not afraid to just make things cool because they're cool. I think that's just the main takeaway. The main takeaway about this entire Zenless Zone Zero discourse is just let shit be cool. Right, thank you, Wise. Back in.
Make way for the undefeated champion! Come on.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that kind of summarized everything. So I think the rest of the stream will just be kind of showcasing the rest of the characters, and then kind of concluding from there. I think I got down most of the main points I had to make. appreciate Lila's animation.
Go.
Proceeding as ordered.
Flames fade. Ash remain.
Flames, obey me!
Yeah, even with a character like Soldier 11, it was like a character who uses a fire sword. Nothing too crazy, but just the fact that, you know, her very it's still like a sword that sheaths on the back, but even the sheath is like unconventional, right? It's like a backpack that has like a weird holster in it, and you can maybe like guess from there that maybe that's where the fire comes from, because maybe there's like a kind of flint mechanism in it, or like some kind of you could imagine that these are like fuel cells or like gas tanks that kind of feed fuel into the sword that ignites it. I mean, just these general details that even early RWBY had, because, you know, early RWBY, because it had such an emphasis on its weapons, that these details would reward you for observing them, because by noticing these details, you can sort of figure out the character and how they fight. And that's, again, a very RWBY-esque thing to do, because I will forever be sore about the fact that Raven, you know, the RWBY character, Raven, her swords have a trigger on them. You can go back to Volume 2, you can look at it. You can look at Raven, and you see that her swords have triggers on them. Did you ever see her use those triggers in any of her fights after that? Like against Cinder or anyone else? I don't think so. What would the trigger have been for? It might have been for igniting the dust. It might have been for launching the blades at people. We'll never know, because it seems that even RWBY itself did not pay attention to Raven's weapon, and Monty died before he could ever divulge what Raven's weapon was supposed to be. But the fact that he put that detail in Raven's weapon, he put a trigger on the sword that implies that when you press the trigger, something happens, and then you do nothing with it. And, you know, that might seem like a nitpick, but in any other story, but it's RWBY, right? Why would you not put a trigger on a sword in RWBY if you're not gonna use it, right? You might as well just have her use a regular sword.
No reaction.
But you know, we don't want to focus on fighting in our big boy grown-up story, so the trigger on the sword does nothing. And, you know, I might just be very particularly salty about that, but it's kind of like a small frustration that just mounts up into generally what RWBY gets so wrong about itself in general, is that the pieces were all there, right? If it was a big mystery that no one could figure out, then, you know, we wouldn't be having this debate. But it could have been figured out. The pieces were there. You know, you had the trailers, we had the weapons, we had the fighting styles, we had the Grim, we had Aura, we had all the pieces to make something that knew exactly what it wanted to be. And I don't know, guys, I think we kind of blew it. I'm just saying we kind of did. And why Zenless Zone Zero feels so refreshing is because it feels like a second chance, right? Like, it may not be, obviously it's not RWBY, it's not RWBY based. It may be, you know, maybe partly inspired by RWBY, but it's not like it can't be like a replacement for RWBY per se. But what I find so good about Zenless Zone Zero and why I love the game so much is because it feels like a partial redemption story. Because, you know, after like years of RWBY trying to be this big boy TV series, trying to be some big fantasy epic, and then, you know, failing at it, and then the company going under, and now it's on permanent indefinite hiatus where we don't know what's going to happen to it next. Zenless Zone Zero came out, launched, came out of the box doing exactly what it's meant to be. You know, a focused story about people fighting, doing cool shit, and it feels like a vindication. It's like I'm here, sitting here, like, yes, thank you. That's all it had to be, and look how good it looks, right? You know, maybe you guys were wrong to think that it had to be anything other than that, because look at this and how much we could have gained. You know, how many years of great fights, of great weapons, of really creative combat we could have gotten that we lost in those years. You know, it feels like a great shame to know we lost that much, but it also feels good because now we have something that kind of scratches that itch. You know, it won't entirely scratch the RWBY itch, but it scratches it enough. You know, it has so much in common that it just feels really nice to engage with, and you feel rewarded for it. It is, you know, besides all the visual elements, it just feels like a legitimate good game to play. You know, even if you don't like gacha games, you know, that's understandable, but by itself it feels like a very, very solid game to play. And who else did I want to check before we move on? I think we can take a look at we're going to the normal simulation because I wanted to show off Lycon,
This is the path.
who's like the
I'm at your
Mercury.
disposal.
So obviously, wait, give me a second. So Lycon is,
I shall follow
he's
your
just
orders.
Mercury in terms of the legs, right? He's nothing else like Mercury. Doesn't have Mercury's personality, doesn't have his backstory. He's just a guy who kicks, right? That's where the similarities begin and end. But he does it very well, right? He has prosthetic legs that transform and do kicky cool shit. It's essentially the Mercury adjacent character, which I'll show off later. So we'll pick him.
I'm at your disposal.
Who else should we pick? We'll pick Nicole.
Need something?
Nicole
My
is
services are expensive.
the Coco of the game, so I'll show her off. And who else has like a clear RWBY parallel? No one. Oh, how could I forget?
Time to clock out.
Haumasa. We'll talk about him later as well. That's the main one.
Me? Sure, I guess.
Right, let's go in. Right. Right. Alright, so nope, we don't want the enemies to move. Stunnable enemies level, go all the way to 60, 50. Unlimited energy, unlimited assist points. Alright, so we'll look at these final 3 characters and then I think I'll end the stream there. But basically, we have Lycon, who is like, for all intents and purposes, he's Faunus Mercury. So he fights with kicks and all that. And again, the willingness to do cool shit is the fact that his legs look well designed, right? Because, I mean, Mercury's legs are fine and all, but they do look kind of
Would you like a cup of tea?
plain. I mean, they do the job. They look like robot legs, but these look like actual weapons, right? These look like they can transform. They can mess shit up. They look like
Have you run
a
into
RWBY-esque
trouble? You
boots that you would have. They can transform and stuff. And he has, you know, very kick-based. They glow if you like. So these are his regular attacks. And then if you hold the attack button, you can like charge up his attack, so like it glows.
Quickly now.
And of
With
course,
this power,
I mean, did you see that shit? Those were jet boots, right? They may not shoot bullets, alright? I'll give points to Mercury for that. But, you know, jet boots that light up and
for you,
do shit like this is pretty damn close. Pretty damn close. Alright. Let's go to Haramasa next. Actually, no. We'll save him for last. So, Nicole is Coco. Like, you know how I said Seth is just John? Nicole is just Coco. In every sense of the word, Nicole is like a main character. Coco shows like a main character in RWBY. Because, number one, she's fashionable. She's like this kind of diva, fashionable girl archetype. Very girly, very feminine. Very concerned with fashion and appearances. And she has a suitcase that shoots things and transforms into a gun. I mean, if you had to boil down Coco as a character, you know, a chick with a fashionable chick with a briefcase that turns into a gun. That's essentially the same character brief here. And you know, it's not as elaborate as Coco's. I mean, yeah, obviously. But it doesn't like, you know, transform fully into a gun. It's more like the case just opens up and shoots from it. So, you know, it's a lot more straightforward. But you can see that kind of RWBY philosophy in this combat, in that she's not just standing still and shooting, right? I mean, she does with a cannon because that feels like a heavier attack, but she's firing the suitcase by swinging it around, right? And it's just this general understanding that motion is such a key part of like the weapons and the abilities, that there's such a concerted consideration for how the character should move and how to make these outlandish weapons work in the setting they're in, right? Because she's not like aiming it like a rifle, she's not standing still to shoot. It's like a big heavy object, and when she's swinging it around and it fires around. And you know, if this was like a realistic show, you'd be asking, you know, why would you do that? It's like going everywhere, you can't aim it properly. Well, screw you, I want to swing a bag and make it hit people, and then when it does, it just shoots exactly where it needs to be because it's cool. And that's exactly the kind of mindset you need to have with RWBY, or making something like RWBY rather, because, and I mean, yeah, basically, and the fact that it's kind of a simplification of the kind of concept that Coco was meant to be. And I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. It's just, you know, it may not be as detailed as Coco, but it feels like it just gets the assignment right. It understands the character archetype needs to make, you know, the weapon it needs to make, and it executes it exactly like it needs to be. So that's not much to say about that, because, you know, Coco herself is not a very fleshed out character. But go to Haramasa next. So guys, remember when Cinder had a weapon, and remember when she had like these two blades that fold out into a bow? Like,
So tired. It's okay if I take
it is I mean, he is basically how Masa is basically like Cinder in terms of combat. I would say appearances as well. He has like the yellow eyes, the black hair. That's one thing. I haven't played his backstory yet, but I have reason to believe his backstory is also very, very Cinder's adjacent, because you see the choker on his neck. Apparently, from what I've heard, the choker on his neck is supposed to hide a scar. You know what other character in RWBY who wears something on their neck to hide a scar? Yeah. So I'm not saying that.
I can fix it for a bit.
Well, I actually am. I am saying that they probably know. No, I mean, the fact this company, the fact that I can't confidently say that they definitely watched RWBY and are basing shit directly on it is what frustrates me, because it would confirm so many of my suspicions. But the fact that they're kind of like tongue-in-cheek about it makes it even more. Well, let's just watch the guy fight, right? So he has the bow, but he also has the swords, which you have to see him fold them out. It's a bit hard to see, but you can see it here. And yeah, I mean, swords that combine into a bow, I think I've seen it at least once outside of RWBY, right? It's not totally unique to RWBY. But I would not be entirely surprised if, you know, someone saw Cinder in RWBY, saw that she had like the blades that combine to a bow, which she never like used again afterwards, and they're like, hey, you know, what gives? Why didn't you go with that? That was a cool idea. And then they made Haramasa, and they're like, okay, let's take that idea to its logical extreme and make a character whose entire fighting style is focused around this weapon. Because another problem RWBY had, because it was trying so hard to be Avatar, it was trying so hard to be some magic Tolkien fantasy story, is that they wanted to have magic and characters using magic instead of weapons, you know, the thing that the entire setting is based on. And by the end of RWBY, you had like the most powerful characters in the story all just flinging Diet Coke, Avatar, fireballs instead of using cool just throwing weapons, and that's another big problem it had. But yeah, we have like the combining the bow,
Clear mind. Arrows fly through.
and I'll just show off his animation because I don't really use him that much. So you can see how like he uses the blades as a boomerang. And he gets up close to, he combines like ranged attacks with the blades. And he can aim it as well. And then his weapon glows with like electricity. I mean, dust doesn't exist in Zenless Zone Zero, but you could very easily like implement dust into like, you know, its world building, because the fact that these characters all use some sort of elemental attack. Like you see how Lycon, his boots are like glowing with like ice. Yeah, because it's like using like some sort of super cool jet to like power up his boots.
Quickly now.
I mean, it's all these little details that make it so like entertaining to engage with Zenless.
Ever heard the whistle of arrows?
All these little
in
details
flight?
that make you appreciate the characters, the combat, how they fight. I mean guys, if it's not already clear by now, I just really love this game. I really appreciate it. It's really kind of like revitalized like what I love about RWBY, and I'm really glad it exists because it proves that it can be done, you know, that other studios can do it. You know, Monty definitely laid a very unique groundwork for RWBY, right? But even he, obviously all artists, they're informed by things that came before, you know. Monty was a fan of Final Fantasy, he was a fan of Devil May Cry and probably all sorts of other games, and that's what influenced him to make RWBY. And then I would like to think, you know, that Monty's work, in the same way that Final Fantasy and all these other games influenced Monty to make RWBY, I would like to think that Monty's work and RWBY helped the Zenless Zone Zero devs make Zenless Zone Zero, right? So that might be peak delusion, right? That some super famous Eastern gacha game developer knows about some obscure indie animation that fell off years ago, and that kind of helped influence the core of its philosophy with weapons
Ever heard
and
the whistle of arrows in flight?
combat. But I would like to think that at a minimum, one of the animators or one of the developers in Zenless Zone Zero watched the red trailer. They weren't a RWBY fan even. They didn't watch RWBY. They just saw the red trailer, or they saw like a compilation of RWBY fights on YouTube. And maybe that gave them an idea that later helped them make Zenless Zone Zero as good as it looks now and feel as good as it does now, right? Is that so much to ask? I mean, what's the point I was trying to make? Yeah, the fact that something like this exists gives me hope that more stuff like it can exist, right? That even though RWBY, you know, is kind of, we don't know where RWBY's going from here, but we can sort of, or at least I can sort of take solace in the fact that replicating RWBY's success, or rather creating the success that RWBY tried to make, is possible. You know,
Clear mind.
it's not
Arrows fly through.
it's not something doomed to fail. That you know, that RWBY, because you know, just because RWBY fell short of what it wanted to be, doesn't mean that it's impossible to do. That it's entirely possible to do with the right team, with the right mindset, and with the right intentions.
Ever
right?
heard the whistle of arrows in flight?
That with the right you know, with the right mindset, that you want to make something as cool as possible, make cool characters, make cool weapons, with cool monsters. That this is an ethereal, by the way, because we didn't get to fight one earlier. This is basically like the Grim of the setting. So you know, they're not red and black. That'd be too on the nose, but there's a lot of different types of them. I could show them a bit later, but yeah, that's kind of the conclusion.
Who's the pathetic one now?
The conclusion I want to make is that making something RWBY-esque is entirely possible, and I think we should take that as an encouragement that not only can we make something like RWBY with the right drive, we may not have, you know, the billions of dollars that Hoyoverse has, but billions of dollars cannot buy intention. Billions of dollars, you can, I mean, look at AAA gaming, right? You can throw millions of dollars at something and it can still be mid. It can still fall off. It can still not make people interested, right? Concord is a prime example of that, and I'm not gonna get into all that because, you know, I'm not a game discourse channel, and neither do I want to be. But the fact that creative direction, creativity, and intention, knowing what you want to make, is more key, and the money is just what helps make it look as polished as possible. But you know, Monty could do it with the red trailer alone, with, you know, Shane Newville and all that. He could do it alone, making the RWBY trailers. And if anything, the 4 RWBY trailers are probably like the most true incarnation of RWBY to exist, right? Because even starting from Volume 1, you could say that it felt like kind of a different show than what the trailers were kind of indicating. So the red trailer, you know, Monty could make the red trailer alone, and that alone communicated exactly the kind of world, like exactly the kind of focus that it wanted to have. And I think that's something we should take to heart, that it's possible with anyone. And Even if and if it's possible with anyone, it's possible with RWBY too. It's my hope, because with Viz running it, it's my hope that they understand what RWBY needs to be and that they take it to heart. Especially since they're like a company that works with Shonen Jump, that works with these sort of anime, that they understand that they bought RWBY, right? Because they spent millions to acquire the RWBY IP. Why would they have done it if maybe they didn't have some inkling of the potential that RWBY had, of what it wanted to be? Why buy it, right? Why not just let it rot in a Warner Brothers vault for the rest of its life? They bought it because maybe they had a plan, they have some sort of plan for it. And you know, I won't get too optimistic. We have no news on RWBY whatsoever. But I would like to believe in them, right? I would like to have some optimism and idealism left in my soul after everything that RWBY has committed upon me, that if Zenless Zone Zero can do it, if Zenless Zone Zero can do it, then by golly gosh, hopefully RWBY one day when it returns can do it too. And I'm just here to show off like some of the ethereal bosses. These are like bosses that we fight, and the bunch of different forms that have, we have like animal forms, we have more humanoid looking forms, a lot of them are random robots. Like this is like a kind of like a paladin equivalent. We have one that's like an archer. So it definitely takes a lot of steps that even RWBY doesn't take, right? Because RWBY, the Grim are mostly based on animals and whatever, but if you're trying to make something, it had like humanoid Grim later on with like the apathy and all that, but that came way later in RWBY's development. But here, Zenless Zone Zero already comes out having like ethereals, which is like Grim, humanoid ethereals, because in the lore, when you enter the hollows meaning the giant zones that corrupt everything, if you stay in that too long, you get corrupted and you turn into one. So the lore in Zenless is basically people turn into Grim, or things in general like animals and all that can turn into Grim because they're exposed to the weird mumbo jumbo inside the hollows. So it's different from RWBY, but maybe RWBY, that might be a better idea, who knows. But let's see what else I can show off before we conclude. Let's see. Well, we got the store, we got the street. Well, I think I could just show off like we'll end by showing off the city and like various parts of it. Excuse me. So back at the city, I mean, we have General Chop, and for the life of me, I couldn't tell you what species General Chop is supposed to be, but I can appreciate the fact that they just made some weird looking Daruma doll guy because they could, right? Because I was saying in my last video how faunas in RWBY were very limited because of that arbitrary one trait rule they had. That's why they couldn't have a tail. That's why they could only have like either a tail or ears, but not both, because of some arbitrary rule that they made up that they can just not do at any time. They could just say, fuck it, I want to have a cool tail with my ears, and they could have just done it. No one, I mean, it's not like they weren't already contradicting their own law before. I don't see why they couldn't do it now for things that were actually cool. But that's going on a tangent. But the fact that Zenless just wanted to have a cool, I mean, not, well, I would say cool, but like just a wild idea, and they just ran with it. And if they want like a dog, not even a faunus, just a legit a dog running a newsstand. They just had it. I won't wake them up. But let's go to the other parts of the city. So this is just one of the streets in Zenless, but there are so many different places in that they added to the place. You have Port Elpis, and it's all part of the same city, New Eridu. And this is part of what I was saying with how focused Zenless feels, because with the previous Hoyoverse games, with like, oh, I need to collect the chest down there. With Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, they were very, very expansive. They had like entire galaxies or worlds worth of, you know, different countries and all that. And Genshin is close to what RWBY's world is, right? It has multiple nations and cultures. But if you ask me, they should have just done what Zenless did and just have it focus on Vale and Beacon Academy. Like, sure, we can have other nations, right? We can have Mistral, we can have Vakko, we can have Atlas, but we really should not have been in a hurry to go there, right? We could have just explored or understood Mistral or Atlas or Vakko just from seeing other students from there, from seeing people from the Vile tournament. We didn't need to go there, right? Because we all saw the cost of going there. The cost of going there was spending 2 seasons there, blowing up the school there, or blowing up the entire ass city, and then leaving and never coming back, without and barely understanding any of the culture, any of the anything, really. We were just there for plot reasons. I mean, yes, that's entirely it. The only reason we visited, I mean, this is the train station. The only reason we visited the other kingdoms was because the plot wanted it to, because of the quest, the maidens, the relics, right? Because, wait, where's Lumina Square? I need to go there. Here we go. Because the plot needed to, and when the plot had no longer need of the other nations, we kicked them to the curb. There was no... There was the pretense of wanting to explore, for wanting to world build, but really it was just because the story demanded it, and there was no real considered effort to explore the culture of that kingdom. So if you're not gonna bother, why even go there? Just stay in Vale and make Vale as fleshed out as possible. So we're in Lumina Square. It's like downtown, so it's like the upper end of the city. And you know, we have like a nice city vibe to it. That's another thing, right? Another thing that RWBY like going full like fantasy and like really like losing a lot of that modern aesthetic to it. Like you saw Volume 4. You saw Volume 4 how it's like all a bunch of... It regressed back into the medieval era. They legitimately just visit a blacksmith in Volume 4. Like, a blacksmith. Are we like in a JRPG now? RWBY started with a city. It started with scrolls. It started with the CCT. Why are we suddenly back in like medieval Japan or China, going around doing like JRPG quests? That I won't elaborate, but I mean you get it, right? Because that fusion of fantasy and sci-fi or modern aesthetics is what made RWBY, because you can't have weapons like in RWBY, you know, RWBY style of weapons without an advanced, at least, you know, a modern technology level. And Zenless also understands that. That's why we have, you know, a very modern aesthetic to it. So this Lumina Square. And what I also really appreciate is how much it incorporates the before I go on that point, I'll just show off Blazewood, because Blazewood is on the outskirts, right? So this is like not exactly like Mountain Glen. It's not exactly like Patch either. You can imagine it like what Argus would be. Argus is kind of like this city that's outside of the other kingdoms, but it has like enough of a society going on. So it's kind of like this podunk Wild West town outside of New Eridu. But even then, it's still like, you know, it's still within the periphery. It's not like a huge area, but it has like personality. It has like a vibe to it. It doesn't have to be more than what it is. And that's what I really respect about Zenless Zone Zero, is that the restraint it has in not overreaching itself, right? And you have like a hollow, that's like the hollow in the distance, so that is where like all the Grimm are, basically. I don't know if they can leave the area, but basically that's where all the hunters or agents, they go into there, and that's where they fight the Grimm. And then if you stay in there too long, you get corrupted and you become a Grimm yourself. So yeah, so to my other point, what I really appreciate about Zenless's world building is it implements that combat aspect into its world building very well. Let me just take another drink. Is that what I really appreciate is that the fact that the hollows, you know, the disaster areas, are such a core part of its world, and you know, the ethereals and all that, that they have aspects of its world dedicated entirely to those alone. So this is the HIA. So the HIA is the, I believe it's called the Hollow Investigation Association, and it basically is kind of like, I wouldn't say it's like the Huntsman Academy. It's not really. It's not at all. But it's like if there's an association in Vale that's entirely focused on like exploring the wilderness and kind of investigating like the Grimm and where they come from. I guess that's kind of the closest equivalent. And you can see that in all like its posters and how it like builds the world. You know, we will reclaim this world from the hollows. It has this unique vibe to it, right? That it engages with its world building in a very real way. Like, imagine if we saw like, I mean, RWBY had bits of this here and there, right? We have like, imagine if we had like posters and billboards and broadcasts talking about public safety, like what to do when you encounter a Grimm, or these kind of propaganda style posters, but you know, more like, you know, posters that encourage the populace that, you know, we can fight against the Grimm. These sort of things that increase your immersion into the world. You know, these are how, wait, let me pull out my camera. These are how legends are born. Taking back our future. These are very cool cool phrases that, you know, would not, they're very like, it's very shonen vibe, right? It's like very inspiring. It makes you want to like fight back against the disaster that's taking the world, and it engages with it so earnestly, whereas RWBY, it kind of forgets like the Grimm are there half the time, you know, and the Grimm are kind of like an afterthought when they need something to happen. But here it's like the Grimm, the ethereals, or rather, or the hollows, but basically like, you know, the Grimm, the threat to the world, is such, you know, is such a critical part of its world building that it's present everywhere in the society, right? And there's just so much to appreciate in that. And this is just the Hollow Investigation Association. If we go to I believe let's go to Scott Outpost. So Scott Outpost is another interesting piece of world building. It's like this military base, basically. It's a military base that is next to the, I think, the biggest hollow in the world, right? So this is like the main, most dangerous, biggest hollow in Zenless Zone Zero's world. And Scott Outpost is like a military base built as like a base of operations against it. And you see those you see these pillars with these shining beams in the distance. Those are the Shiyu pillars. So the Shiyu pillars, they are kind of like gigantic generators that channel ether energy to the city. So they're basically like power plants. And you know how I mentioned just now how the hollows have like these ether crystals in them that people kind of harvest like dust? Well, these pillars are basically like gigantic dust generators that I guess you can see from like the rocks there. They're like breaking down the dust and harnessing its power to power the city. And that's the kind of shit we need in RWBY. That's kind of the world building we need. We don't know how dust freaking works. How does dust power the cities? Well, here's your answer. Here's how Zenless Zone Zero answered it. There's like gigantic generators, and it's not just like regular boring ass power plants. It's like these cool pillars that emit light into the sky. So even then, they know how to make it cool. And this outpost is here to like basically form like imagine if this is like a permanent hunter base, right? A permanent base where hunters are always stationed, so that whenever like there's a grim threat within the largest hollow in the world, they can just mobilize the hunters out and get it. And that's kind of a gameplay thing, because here is where like you take certain missions and enter to basically enter the hollows and hunt certain enemies. Like you can see here, like the certain notorious hunt is basically like a bounty where you have to take down very prominent ethereals or grim, basically, right? That are basically like the bosses of their world. So like the most prominent grim in this world would have like their own titles and names, and they would be like infamous within that world, and it's your job to go in there and to like sort of call them. And that's the kind of world building we need, right? Like, and we have all sorts of them. We have like this giant guy with a polearm. We have one that's kind of like merged with a machine. We have like two grim that's like one grim that's split into two, and that's like kind of looks like a ballerina. We have a grim on a bike. I mean that we have to look. I mean you have to fight to see, but it rides a bike. A grim that rides a bike. And we have like one that's like that also has a very cool fight, but I can't show that all today. Maybe another time perhaps. But it's just so, I don't know, man. It's just so unapologetically cool. It's hard not to love it, right? And let's go to Hand headquarters. That's I guess the last place we'll stop at. So Hand headquarters, the equivalent in RWBY is sort of like, think of it as like, because I forgot what Hand stands for specifically, but Hand is basically like the elite huntsman headquarters, right? It's where the most elite kind of hollow investigators are stationed. So the HIA, which was that place you saw just now, is more of a civilian facing organization. So they help with informing the public about the hollows and about the dangers they face. So they have a lot of like these simulations, like they implement it into the gameplay very like nicely, the world building. They have like this VR virtual reality test simulation that in game is just for you to like fight enemies and all that, but in the world building is to simulate combat situations to prepare like fighters and even civilians to understand how to fight or defend against ethereals. And here so that's more of a public facing institution. Hand is more of the elite organization. So if I can figure out how to get in, let's switch our character. So we want to get the hand headquarters just to get a vibe for the world building involved. Because I mean, we know jack shit about the hunters in RWBY, guys. We know jack shit. All of Mistral's hunters were killed overnight by 2 people. Like Haven Academy was basically empty. We didn't see any students in there at all. Remember that. And all the huntsmen in Mistral, in Haven, died off screen because Hazel killed them. Because yeah, Hazel and Tyrion, yeah, they were real big shots, I suppose, that they managed to take down all of this infrastructure. Like look at this infrastructure for one city, and imagine all this infrastructure for the entire kingdom being dismantled overnight by 2 guys, just because that's what the plot wanted. That's the level of lack of care that RWBY had for its world building, and how detrimental it was to everything else, right? And I'm really glad that Zenless really takes care into these sort of things, because I mean, just look at how immersive everything is. You have like these instruments, we have like these maps highlighting like where are like certain points in the world that we have like grim activity. It's like it's a part of the world, and there's just so much to appreciate in that, right? Like I'm sorry if I'm silent, because I'm actually exploring this place for the first time as well, but it's just a lot to appreciate, and that's kind of what I love about it. So if there's nowhere else to go, I believe where was it? Like, yeah, I think that's the gist of all I wanted to talk about. So we just kind of end on Sokaku here while I read the last of the chats. But yeah, let's see. Yeah, a lot of you guys are mentioning how Monty would add things in last minute. I mean, yeah, basically, I mean, that's unavoidable. That's just kind of a symptom of RWBY that is unavoidable. But I think, and there's no take backs on that, right? Because Monty's gone. History is history. But it shows like what a premise like RWBY could have benefited from with like a little bit of planning and foresight. Like how much more could have been done with a premise like RWBY's, because Zenless's premise is pretty much exactly like RWBY's. It just doesn't have the academy, but it is about people fighting these shadow monsters with cool weapons. Is essentially a RWBY type setting, and with a little bit of care put into how the world works, how the world operates, there's just so much that you could do with it. And let me read the rest. I mean, yeah, like Alex says, why didn't RWBY have like different hunter organizations, corporations? I mean, yeah, we don't know anything about hunters. We don't know whether they had like groups, whether they maybe had like different patrons or sponsors. How did they organize themselves? How did they work with the military? And yeah, that's like talking about like,
This is the path I follow.
because Yanagi and Miyabi
Awaiting orders.
and Sokaku and Hawamasa, they all belong to the section 6, which is like the elite hunter faction. And Miyabi specifically Miyabi specifically is a void hunter, and a void hunter is like the elite of the elite of the hunters in this world. Like, and there's only like maybe a handful of them out there in the world. And I mean, that's like a page from the shonen handbook that RWBY could have taken, that RWBY needed to take. Like, we don't know what counts as a powerful hunter in RWBY's world. We know Team Stark, we know Crow, we know they're kind of big deals, but really there's like so little that we know about hunters in general and like their society, that because Crow is and the other hunters are like the only professional hunters we see for like most of RWBY, right? And the rest are kind of like 2-bit nobodies like Dee and Dudley or other nameless people that we don't care about. So we have no idea like how, like, hunters as a concept is a cool idea. They're monster hunters, right? You can't really go wrong with that. And then you have people who are like the most elite of them who can like mess shit up, right?
Eradicate all evil.
And let me see if I can find a way to like see. I forgot if there's a way to like look at all the different factions in the world. I don't think there is. I don't believe there is though. Compendium achievements, not really.
This is the path I follow.
But
Eradicate all evil.
well, I guess we can just see the factions from here. So like, yeah, these are like the kind of elite hunters in this world. Well, not elite in the sense that they're the best, but they're just kind of like the most like they're part of like that most elite faction. They're like professional hunters in that sense because they have like the entire organization backing them, whereas other hunters in this world, they're more casual. They're kind of like freelancers, right? They're freelancers, whereas Section 6 is like directly affiliated with the government, so they have like direct backing from the government. So it's like if hunters in RWBY, you have like freelance hunters, and then you have like hunters who work directly for the Kingdom of Vale full time to like defend its borders. It's kind of like that. And then we have the Sons of Caledon, which are the biker gang, those who live on the outskirts of the city. We have the PubSec, public security. It's basically like the police force. So again, it's like using the factions to world build, and there are police in this world, and they don't really hunt ethereals. That's not really their job. Their job is literally just to be like cops. But even then, because because hollows are such a part of the world that they have to eventually deal with it in some way or form, because a lot of criminals, because hollows, they're like these gigantic domes, right? And they don't work with regular real world rules. So you can go into a hollow and end up somewhere else entirely. Like, hollows can be used to hide yourself, because people won't like, it's hard to track people inside of a hollow, because like I believe like most electronics like don't work there. And so a lot of criminals use the hollows as like hideouts or as like trade routes to like go in and out undetected. And so PubSec, public security, have to investigate these criminal organizations that hide inside the hollows, or like transport illegal goods within the hollows, and make sure that they don't do that. And just like that, even the cops in this world have a reason to be involved with the main threat of the world. And Obol Squad is unknown right now. There's not much lore on them, but they're kind of like you can think of them as like a spec ops team. So they're kind of like I think they're like mercenaries, right? So they're a bit mysterious right now. But Victoria Housekeeping, they're basically like maids and butlers. But even then, they're not like boring maids and butlers, right? Because this is like a RWBY-esque world, or at least intentionally like, a cool sort of world, so they can fight, right? And they're kind of like freelancers in that they help whatever you need, they can handle it, right? So whether it's to trim some bushes or to guard a secure facility inside a hollow, they'll do it. I think as long as it's, you know, lawful. Then you have Billabong Heavy Industries, which is like a construction company, and they have an entire plot in the first arc of the game regarding like construction and all that, because, you know, infrastructure is like a huge part of this world, because, you know, there's like so much buildings that were lost, so many like key infrastructure that was lost because of the hollows, right? Like imagine a hollow popping up and that cuts off like an entire railway route, or cuts off an entire the capital from the rest of the world. So it would make sense to have a construction company involved in the plot, because we shall like investigate how to sort of rebuild the world, right? It's about, like RWBY says, it's a hope punk setting, but this is hope punk because it's trying to like rebuild a world after an apocalypse. And of course, being a cool badass world, even the construction workers can fight too, which is why we have this faction. And then the Cunning Hares, they're like the kind of the starter team of the setting. They're not like the main characters, but they're kind of like the Team RWBY equivalent in that they're kind of like the POV characters. They're kind of the people you see the most, besides like the main protagonist. And they're like freelancers basically. So they're like the freelance hunters who go around. They barely make any money. They kind of live paycheck to paycheck, but they take on these odd jobs, doing various jobs within the hollows. And that's just such a diversity in how, you know, these hunters, or agents rather, they organize themselves, and like how you can find some that work for freelance, how some of them they work for the government, how some they don't even live within the city, but they can fight, because, you know, at least, you know, in RWBY terms, you have aura, you have a semblance, you can fight, so they won't even be hunters necessarily. But yeah,
all evil.
what else did I want to show? I mean, there's also Internet, which is basically like a chat app. So when you use your phone, you can sort of access like the internet in this world, and this particular place, the Internet, is like, it's kind of like a dark web. It's like a bit of a underground internet where proxies make forums, because you are a proxy, someone who provides like mission control to these agents going into the hollows. And proxies are actually illegal. Like, the profession is illegal because the government of Zenless Zone Zero wants to standardize the exploration of hollows by themselves, right? They want to take it out. They want to take it all on themselves, and they want to regulate the exploration of the hollows to make sure that, you know, people don't illegally enter the hollows. And, you know, I mean, it makes sense why they would do that, but there's a very vast underground industry for illegal hollow raiding for all these agents, because obviously the government can't handle all of it. So, like, you know, in Vale's case, you can't rely on professional hunters for everything. You might have like something the government can't help with, or something that you just fall under the cracks, and that's where the proxies come in, who are like freelancers who organize these freelance agents to enter the hollows themselves with their own amateur equipment to handle whatever tasks that may come up. And again, this is just such a neat little world building detail that is implemented into the gameplay, because you yourself are one, so you're kind of like reading through different message boards and posts, reading people's comments, and it feels like a living, breathing world that you can engage with, that you're seeing like, oh, what are other like agents and proxies' opinion about the current events in the world, and like what other jobs are there, what other jobs are there to like take on. And this is such, like, RWBY has, like, you know, the cool factor, right, that ZCC emulates. But one thing that ZCC has in spades that RWBY really lacked is such an earnest engagement with its world building that RWBY really lacked, that I really appreciate in Zenless Zone Zero. That it really, in all aspects, from its gameplay to its world building, it really engages with its world in such an involved and immersive way that really scratches that itch, you know, like really scratches the RWBY lore nerd in me that wanted to know how are hunters organized, how do the hunters work with the government, how does dust power the cities. Zenless Zone Zero actually cares enough about its world to answer that, and that's again what I really appreciate about it. And I think that's a great point to conclude that. And alright, so that's where I end. Thank you all for joining me on this long-winded deep dive into Zenless Zone Zero, its world, its various characters, and comparing them to RWBY, and just and to reiterate my my point that I gave just now. If Zenless Zone Zero can do it, even though RWBY, you know, pretty much kind of fumbled with it the first time, it is my hope, my sincere, honest hope, that with Viz Media, even that, you know, that RWBY has a second chance to get it right. And it really has no excuse this time. Number one, because the old RWBY is there to learn all its mistakes from, and, you know, the thousands of hours of critiques about it that you can dissect. But also, more importantly, I think, because a successful version of RWBY exists in Zenless Zone Zero that you can literally play and study in detail and understand how it gets right. Because, you know, if you look at RWBY, what RWBY got wrong and how to make it right from there, you know, it's very abstract, right? You don't really know where to begin. But here you have a concrete game with a big world, a story, a detailed combat system that shows you in concrete terms what you could do with a premise like RWBY, what you could do with an aesthetic like RWBY, with a focus on weapons and combat like RWBY, without, you know, while still focusing on characters, and you know, and that earnest kind of shonen vibe where idealism and heroism wins the end. Because here's a video archive that has like the different character stories, and that and this like Lycon story, this is like a Rena story, and these are like different chapters that you can play that explore the different characters' backstories within Zenless Zone Zero. And it just gets so much right, you know. It doesn't really neglect any aspect of itself. You know, it doesn't neglect the action, it doesn't neglect the weapons and the cool factor, it doesn't neglect its characters, it doesn't neglect its world building. It gets pretty much everything right. So really, if anyone from Viz is watching this, which I highly doubt, you know, I highly doubt any of them will watch this, but if they would, please just study this game, because it is such a good blueprint of like what you could do with RWBY. And since RWBY does have the potential for a second chance, there is you will not find like a more useful resource for how you can get it right than Zenless Zone Zero, in my opinion. And that's basically my conclusion. So that's basically it. Thank you all for joining me for this stream. I might stream again just to like maybe do some of the character stories, so you can kind of like get to see more of like the different characters and part of the world. But we'll see when that happens. I'll announce it, I guess, ahead of time. But really, thank you all for joining me on this stream. I hope it's been an enlightening experience for you. Maybe it might convince some of you to play the game and you know, immerse in it yourself. But thank you all for joining me, and I will see you next time.